Usually, when we talk about a heroic life, there's this really ingrained cultural expectation of spectacle, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, like the movie moments.
Exactly. We are totally conditioned to look for the movie moments. Like, you slay the dragon, the crowd goes absolutely wild, the swelling orchestral music kicks in, and the director essentially points the camera right at the protagonist to say, there it is. There is the undeniable triumph.
Well, it is a deeply binary way of looking at success. I mean, if you think about it, you either saved the city or you didn't, right? You
Yeah.
either got the massive promotion or you failed. And we gravitate toward those visible victories because they are, frankly, incredibly comforting. A climax you can point to on a timeline, well, it just doesn't require any nuance to understand.
No, it doesn't. But then you step into the reality of daily survival,
Sure.
specifically for marginalized individuals.
Mm.
And that entire Hollywood movie set just gets completely dismantled.
Oh, completely.
We are suddenly forced to look at a landscape of heroism that is just completely devoid of fireworks. It's quiet. It's repetitive. I mean, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters when it comes to measuring success. So the question is, how do we quantify the triumph of simply existing in a space that was not designed for you?
Yeah, and to do that, you have to recalibrate your instruments entirely. You have to stop looking for the dragon, right? And you start looking at the mundane machinery of daily life. You basically have to measure victory in the things that actively avoid making the evening news.
Which brings us to the actual architecture of that quiet heroism and the topic of today's deep dive. We all know the 42-minute runtime of the concept album, She Loved Her, 12 love songs about hard roads, and the courage to walk them.
Such a beautiful piece of work.
It really is. And for anyone who studies modern acoustic storytelling, this album and its companion narrative are foundational texts. But today, we're going way past the track list. We are taking a deep dive into the underlying mechanisms of this art piece. We want to understand exactly how it captures the profound resilience of African-American lesbian women.
Moving from profound secrecy to absolute collective stability.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. We aren't analyzing a story about shifting global politics here. This is a story contained entirely within living rooms, church basements, and, bus stops at dusk.
Yeah, and to understand the mechanisms at play here, we first have to map out the emotional geography of the source material.
Okay.
Because the creators structured this narrative across three distinct atmospheric conditions, or weather systems, as they call them.
Weather systems, I love that framing.
It's so effective. So we begin in early life, which is an environment heavily characterized by structured faith, deep confusion, and this absolute necessity of secrecy.
Right, the seed stage.
Exactly. Then the middle phase is young adulthood, where the atmospheric pressure drops drastically. This is where risk, romantic love, and the raw panic of survival all just collide.
And then the final one.
Finally, the album settles into maturity. This is an era defined by stability, quiet dignity, and a fiercely protected sense of belonging. But what's fascinating here, I think, is the core thesis driving all three phases. Survival is not the precursor to victory. Survival itself is the victory.
Wow. Okay, I want to challenge you, the listener, to hold on to that exact thought as we navigate this deep dive. Just consider the sheer unglamorous stamina it takes to just live a seemingly normal life, right? When the overarching societal message tells you that your version of normal is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, it's a heavy burden.
What actually happens to the human psyche when the simple act of paying your rent or holding a partner's hand in a grocery store parking lot is inherently an act of defiance?
Well, the intention of the artist is critical context here. The source material is very explicit that She Loved Her is not a piece of persuasive rhetoric.
Right, it's not a debate.
No, not at all. It is not building a political argument or trying to debate the listener into some new moral framework. It functions purely as a monument. It is an act of witnessing. It's designed to definitively state, we were here. We loved. We built a life.
I love that. So let's examine the foundation of that life by diving into the first weather system. We're looking at that seed stage you mentioned, where the protagonist is learning to navigate a world that is highly structured, deeply moral, and honestly suffocatingly tight. And the thematic core here is what the source notes call the weaponization of silence. We see this immediately in the opening tracks.
Yeah.
The Back Row Girl and Mama Said Pray.
We really do. And if we look at the acoustic engineering of the Back Row Girl, the tempo is deliberately set at 84 beats per minute.
Which is pretty specific.
Very specific. In human physiological terms, 84 BPM closely mirrors the resting heart rate of someone who is alert but trying to remain calm. It's an andante tempo, so like a cautious walking pace.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Right. And the instrumentation reflects this caution completely. We hear finger-picked acoustic guitar, this incredibly warm but muted upright bass, and percussion that feels almost apologetic for taking up sonic space.
Apologetic percussion. That's exactly what it sounds like, because the protagonist is introduced as a child sitting in the back of a church, basically functioning as a silent observer.
Yeah.
The lyrics give us this intensely specific imagery. It goes, Sunday shoes on borrowed feet, wooden pew in summer heat, mama's voice like steady rain, say amen and hide the pain.
Yeah.
I really want to pause on that line. Sunday shoes on borrowed feet. The imagery suggests she is physically present, right? She's dressed the part, but she's entirely disconnected from her own physical autonomy.
That specific lyric is just a masterclass in illustrating alienation from within the very center of a community.
Yeah, exactly.
She is participating in the most unifying cultural ritual available to her, the Sunday service. And she's wearing the socially mandated uniform, yet she feels like an imposter occupying someone else's body. The feet are borrowed because her authentic self has not yet been granted permission to step into them.
Oh, wow.
She is absorbing the rigid rules of her environment before her brain has even fully developed the capacity to understand them, you know?
So she realizes she's an outsider before she even really knows what she's outside of.
Exactly.
The song continues, pastor talking loud and long, everybody sings along. I keep quiet, head bowed low, feeling things I cannot show. It's like she is meticulously calculating every single movement, actively trying to erase her own presence.
And this behavior is what psychologists and the source narrative actually refer to as the discipline of concealment.
The discipline of concealment.
Yeah. And it is vital to understand that this is not a child being naturally shy or introverted.
Right, it's not just stage fright.
No. This is a highly sophisticated, trauma-adjacent survival mechanism. When a child exists in an environment where authenticity feels physically or emotionally dangerous, they basically become an anthropologist of their own existence.
That is a wild way to think about childhood.
But it's true. They learn to monitor the room for microscopic shifts in mood. Most importantly, they learn to detect danger in tone rather than in explicit language.
Because the explicit language in these environments is often incredibly polite or even loving, right?
Yeah.
But the underlying tone carries a lethal judgment.
Exactly. The words are nice, but the delivery is a warning.
So in the track Mama Said Pray, the tempo bumps up just a fraction to 88 BPM, and it introduces this very subtle kind of reedy organ into the mix. And the mother is constantly telling the child, Mama said, pray when you're afraid, pray when your faith begins to fade. But I have to say, I found myself genuinely confused by this dynamic when reading the source notes.
How so?
Well, is the mother supposed to be an antagonistic force here? Like, is she intentionally weaponizing religion against the child?
Oh, that is a crucial distinction to make. No, the mother is not framed as a villain at all. Her intentions are portrayed as fiercely protective and entirely loving. The protagonist explicitly acknowledges this in the song. She says, Mama's strong, she meant it well, built a shield against the hell.
Okay, so she's trying to help.
She is. The tragedy lies in the misapplication of that protection. The mother is handing her daughter the only armor she knows how to forge, which is traditional faith and conformity. But as the lyric devastatingly concludes, but a shield can hide the sun from the truth you're running from.
Man, that is such a vivid articulation of unintended harm. The very mechanism designed to keep the child safe is literally starving her of light.
Yeah.
So the protagonist is bowing her head, reciting the prescribed prayers, but her internal monologue is staging this quiet rebellion. Her actual prayer is, God, please tell me what is me.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. She is begging the very system that is constraining her to give her an exit strategy.
And that internal plea is what eventually fractures that discipline of concealment. The silence she has lived in slowly gives way to a realization. So the narrative moves into the track, The First Secret, and the tempo stabilizes here at 86 BPM. This track represents the precise biological and emotional moment of internal recognition.
The lyrics describe this realization hitting her like playing cards, which is such a great phrase. It details the sudden rush of heat rising to her face when a specific girl laughs across the yard. And the recurring motif of the mirror is introduced here. Mirror hanging on the wall told the truth without a call. Eyes that looked a little scared, holding dreams I never shared.
Yeah, and notice how at this stage, the vulnerability is strictly internal. The external societal pressure still just manifests as the passive weight of expectation. Like listening to other girls discuss boys, nodding along, maintaining the camouflage.
Right, the act. I was trying to conceptualize what it actually feels like to carry the secret of this magnitude at that age. And the analogy I kept coming back to is it's like she's carrying a lit candle in her coat pocket during a windstorm.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to put it.
Because it's beautiful, right? It's
Hmm.
warm, it's hers. But it's terrifying because it could burn her or blow out at any second. You have this constant low-grade terror that someone, somewhere, is going to accidentally pick up your frequency.
Hmm.
But I want to ask you, does the sheer act of hiding this internal truth actually fortify it, or does it just slowly corrode the person carrying it?
Well, what's fascinating here is if we look closely at the psychological framing of the album, it actually does both, which is a brilliant paradox. The corrosion comes from the isolation, certainly.
Right.
But what is truly remarkable is that the protagonist never internalizes her identity as a moral failing. Despite the heavy religious conditioning, her internal compass rejects the idea that her love is corrupt. The song delivers this incredibly gentle thesis. It says, not a sin and not a crime, just a truth before its time.
A truth before its time. I
Yeah.
mean, that fundamentally reframes queer discovery from a narrative of guilt into a narrative of profound patience.
It really does. The secret is basically a fragile ecosystem she is protecting until the external weather is survivable.
But of course, a truth cannot remain internal indefinitely. The biological imperative for connection eventually forces that radio transmitter to start seeking a receiver, right?
Exactly. Which forcefully ejects us from the early life weather system and plunges us directly into the turbulence of young adulthood.
The collision of worlds.
Yes, the controlled, internalized secrecy shatters upon contact with reality. This is the phase where romantic love becomes a tangible hazard, colliding head-on with family structures and community surveillance.
And we see this collision so explicitly in the track Her Hand in Mine, which is followed immediately by Sunday Dinner Silence.
Yeah.
And the juxtaposition between these two environments is just in Her Hand in Mine, the tempo drops down to this languid 82 BPM. The setting is stripped of any grandeur. It's like a bus stop under a flickering yellow street lamp late on a Friday night, and then a coffee shop with a visibly cracked tile floor.
Yeah, the environment is super mundane, but the emotional shift is seismic. By situating the discovery of mutual love in these neglected, liminal spaces, bus stops and rundown diners, the creators are emphasizing that sanctuary is not a physical location.
It's the person.
Exactly. Sanctuary becomes the space between two people. She finds her first safe place inside another human being.
And the relief in the lyrics is palpable. Her hand in mine, simple and true, nothing dramatic, nothing to prove. It is the absolute antithesis of the heavy, calculating, hypervigilant existence she lived in that church pew. For a brief moment, the world goes completely quiet in a good way. The album calls it an electric quiet.
However, that electric healing quiet is immediately contrasted with a deeply toxic silence.
Oh, yeah.
Because the very next track, Sunday Dinner Silence, drops the tempo down to a grueling 80 BPM.
I have to tell you, I found this track physically uncomfortable to listen to. The 80 BPM tempo genuinely feels lethargic. It's almost like it's dragging your nervous system through mud.
And that is a deliberate psychoacoustic choice by the producers. At 80 DPM, the rhythm is slightly slower than a healthy resting heart rate, so it literally induces a feeling of sluggishness and entrapment in the listener. It physically mimics the sensation of sitting in a room you desperately want to leave but simply cannot.
And the scene is so vividly painted, too. The dining table is set, plates are stacked high, forks and spoons are perfectly aligned. The sensory details are just suffocating. Mama is passing the mashed potatoes, but her hands are visibly shaking. Daddy is hiding his entire face behind the evening newspaper, refusing to make eye contact.
It's agonizing.
The lyrics sum it up brutally. Nobody says what everybody knows.
This is the exact moment romantic love is transformed into a battleground. The silence at this dinner table is not the peaceful absence of noise. It is an active, aggressive force. The lyrics state, Sunday dinner silence, louder than a scream. The family is utilizing silence as a disciplinary tool. They're trying to starve the reality of the protagonist's relationship out of existence by simply refusing to acknowledge it.
I really want you, the listener, to mentally place yourself at that table for a moment. Think about the thickest, most oppressive tension you've ever felt in a room. When a massive foundational truth is sitting right in the middle of a family gathering, and every single person is expending massive amounts of psychological energy pretending it isn't there.
It's exhausting.
The air feels heavy. The clinking of silverware sounds violent. And underneath the tablecloth, the protagonist and her partner are holding hands, their knuckles absolutely white. The silence is heavy as a whispered prayer, but nobody is willing to detonate the room by speaking first.
But you cannot sustain that level of psychological pressure without causing structural damage, right?
Yeah.
A human being cannot breathe in a vacuum forever. So the suffocating atmosphere of that dining room inevitably acts as a catalyst for the physical escape.
Which brings us to the two linked tracks that document the departure. Apartment with one window and drive all night. And I have to admit, when I first read the outline of this narrative arc, I found myself getting a bit cynical.
Really? Why is that?
Well, the tempo spikes massively here. Apartment with one window jumps to 96 BPM, and drive all night pushes all the way to 100 BPM. They pack a single suitcase, they leave in the middle of the night, and they blast old soul music on the radio as they speed out of town. It feels very cinematic, very Hollywood.
I see what you mean.
Isn't this exactly the kind of spectacle the album claims to avoid? Like, isn't running away in the middle of the night just a form of cowardice masquerading as independence?
It is entirely understandable why it reads that way on the surface.
Yep.
But if we analyze the mechanics of the situation, the album is actually subverting that Hollywood trope.
How so?
Well, the spike to 100 BPM isn't meant to simulate triumph and joy. It simulates the biological reality of adrenaline and the flight response. A heart rate of 100 BPM is tachycardia. It's the heart pumping as fast as it can because the brain has perceived a mortal threat. If we connect this to the bigger picture, independence here does not begin with a burst of self-actualized confidence. It begins with absolute desperate necessity.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the speed of the car isn't about the thrill of the open road at all. It's about putting as much physical distance between themselves and that dining room table as possible before their nerve completely breaks.
Precisely. And the romantic illusion of the road trip is immediately shattered by their actual destination. The apartment with one window is not a bohemian paradise.
Far from it.
The protagonist details the keeling paint, the total lack of furniture, a bare mattress on the floor, and exactly one small square of visible sky. This isn't a story of upward mobility. It is a lateral move economically, but a massive vertical move psychologically.
Even with the peeling paint and the mattress on the floor, the lyrics reflect a profound shift in oxygen levels. Still, it feels like breathing free, first real place that's mine to be. The adrenaline of the escape begins to metabolize. But here is where the narrative pivots into its most fascinating and honestly difficult phase. Because the gas tank eventually empties, The excitement of fleeing dissipates. Tuesday morning arrives. How does a relationship fundamentally survive when the poetic defiance of running away is replaced by the crushing banality of paying for groceries?
This transition leads us into the core of the deep dive, what the source material designates as the crucible of the everyday. Moving from the dramatic escape to the unglamorous reality of survival,
Right.
the young adulthood phase of high-stakes emotional risk evolves into the grinding, unglamorous mechanics of sustaining a household. The threats they face are no longer concentrated moments of family confrontation. The threat becomes ambient. And we see this shift in the track Neighbors Talk, where the tempo stabilizes slightly to 94 BPM.
The external resistance they encounter in their new neighborhood isn't manifested in violent shouting matches in the street, right?
Yeah.
It is a slow, wearing friction. The visual motifs shift to the subtle movements of neighborhood surveillance.
Curtains moving.
Yeah, curtains twitching as they walk by, hushed conversations on the sidewalk, the sudden silence when they enter the corner store. Every glance a question mark, every silence leaves a spark.
The societal pressure has transformed from the acute trauma of the family dinner table to the chronic ache of public scrutiny. They have successfully escaped the gravitational pull of their parents' expectations, only to realize that the broader world is equally invested in policing their existence.
But the protagonist's response to this ambient hostility is incredibly stoic. There is no desire to fight every neighbor on the block. She simply observes, we keep walking, heads up high, let the rumors wander by, truth ain't loud and truth ain't fast, still it's built to last.
I love that. They are choosing to simply occupy physical space and let the world exhaust itself trying to move them.
And that stoicism requires immense energy. But the true test of their resilience isn't found in ignoring neighborhood gossip. The true test is economic.
To fully explore this, we have to look at the companion narrative provided in the source material. It's a short prose story that runs parallel to the album, focusing on two women named Nadira and Kiara. This story serves as the narrative backbone for the track We Paid the Light Bill, which sits at a driving 98 BPM.
When I first looked at the outline for this section, I was genuinely surprised. I was expecting a massive climax, a confrontation with a landlord, a dramatic protest, some huge external villain. But the central antagonist of this crucial chapter is just a piece of mail. a utility bill.
Because poverty and systemic marginalization rarely announce themselves with a villain's monologue. They announce themselves through mundane logistics.
So true.
The companion narrative sets the scene with clinical precision. It is 6:01 p.m. on a standard, unremarkable Tuesday. The apartment smells faintly of cheap rice and frying onions. Kiara is sitting at a second-hand kitchen table, a pencil tucked behind her ear, staring at a folded envelope from the local electric company. Stamped across the front in red ink are the words, "Final Notice."
And the context of their labor makes that red stamp incredibly heavy.
Yeah.
We learned that they have been living in this apartment for 2 years. The adrenaline of the escape is a distant memory. Kiara is working grueling 12-hour shifts at a hospital laundry facility, a place where industrial washing machines roar constantly like jet engines.
Yeah, exhausting work.
And Nadiri is working the night shift, vacuuming the floors of downtown corporate offices. She spends her nights inhaling the scent of expensive floor polish and lingering cologne in boardrooms. She is only permitted to enter when the wealthy executives have gone home.
Their entire existence is framed by labor that supports the comfort of others, while their own comfort is constantly threatened. When their shifts overlap and they cross paths in the doorway of their apartment, the dialogue isn't poetic. Love here isn't romantic poetry. The romance has been distilled into pure logistical survival. It sounds like, "How was work? Busy. You eat yet? Later."
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. The source narrative explicitly points out that they are no longer fighting abstract concepts like societal judgment or family expectations. They are fighting math.
Yes. Raw, unforgiving arithmetic.
The text says groceries became math problems.
Yeah.
Gasoline became strategy. Laundry loads became decisions. The actual dollar amount on the final notice wasn't in the millions. It wasn't an impossible fortune, but it was just enough to destabilize their entire ecosystem. It was exactly enough to turn the concept of home back into a place of terror.
This scenario perfectly illustrates the profound contrast between internal vulnerability and external pressure. In the early life phase, the danger was psychological. It was the fear of a secret being discovered. In this phase, the danger is brutally tangible. When the overhead light fixture in the kitchen briefly flickers while Nadira is washing the dishes, the narrative notes that both women freeze in absolute panic. The apartment suddenly feels as fragile as a house built from cards.
That flickering light bulb is such a massive metaphor. It is the literal threat of darkness, yes, but it's also the psychological threat that society might actually win. It's the terrifying realization that you can have all the courage in the world, you can defy your family, you can endure the whispers of your neighbors, but if you miscalculate the math by $30, the system will seamlessly erase your sanctuary.
Yet the climax of this story is profoundly victorious. Payday arrives. They sit down at that second-hand table together. There are no dramatic speeches. There is only the quiet scratching of Kiara's pencil as they add, subtract, and recheck the numbers. When the math finally aligns and Kiara physically slides the completed payment across the table, that singular gesture is the emotional peak of the entire album.
The track We Paid the Light Bill mirrors this victory beautifully. The 98 BPM tempo feels driving, purposeful, and honestly surprisingly joyful. The instrumentation introduces hand claps. The lyrics are incredibly simple but carry the weight of a monumental triumph. We paid the light bill, kept the darkness out. Small win, big feeling. That's what life's about. Earning that utility receipt is the absolute fulcrum of their relationship.
So it fundamentally redefines their partnership. It marks the precise transition from individual survival to collective stability.
Wow.
They have manufactured their own stability. They have looked at the economic machinery designed to keep them marginalized, and they have successfully forced it to grant them space.
Which brings up a massive question I had about the sonic landscape of this album. How does the album actually sound while telling this story? Because I was expecting this huge, triumphant orchestral pop anthem when they finally stabilize their lives. If you are telling an epic story about surviving systemic pressure, fighting off poverty, and carving out an unbreakable love against all odds, why on earth did the producers pull back the energy? Why make the entire album so relentlessly quiet and acoustic?
This raises an important question, right? Why make it so quiet? Well, because utilizing the glossy, booming aesthetics of heavily produced pop music would inherently contradict the philosophical core of the narrative. Pop production is designed to sound larger than life. It creates an artificial perfection.
Right. Pop music would ruin this story.
Completely. The production aesthetic of She Loved Her deliberately favors, in the creator's own words, closeness over polish. The audio engineering is designed to force the listener into the room with the subjects. You are supposed to hear breath, wood, and room air.
You literally hear the physical mechanics of the music being made. You can hear the squeak of the guitarist's fingers sliding down the fretboard. You hear the sharp intake of breath from the vocalist before a difficult phrase.
Exactly. In modern commercial music, silence is an enemy to be eradicated. Engineers use heavy compression and synthetic padding to fill every microsecond of dead air. In this album, silence is used like punctuation. It provides the psychological space required for the listener to actually digest the weight of the narrative.
The acoustic texture basically acts as a sonic magnifying glass on their quiet daily moments. When you strip away the drum machines and the synthesizers, a single organic sound becomes monumental. Every single hand clap in We Paid the Light Bill feels hard-earned. The deep, resonating hum of the upright bass in Sunday Dinner Silence doesn't just sound like an instrument. It feels like the anxious thudding of a heartbeat under a wooden table.
It does.
The source material uses a brilliant metaphor for this production style. It says every note arrives with intention, like footsteps in fresh snow.
That imagery perfectly encapsulates the album's mission. Footsteps in fresh snow do not make a loud noise. They don't set off alarms. But they leave a permanent, undeniable physical record of presence. They're a quiet, undeniable declaration that says, I was here, I walked through this cold, and I survived it.
Let's follow those footsteps into the final atmospheric phase of the album. We are transitioning out of the daily grind and into the third weather system, maturity.
The storm has passed.
The sheer panic of the escape is over. The desperate math of the light bill has been solved. So what does life look like for two women who have spent decades looking over their shoulders once they finally realize nobody is chasing them anymore?
We find the answer in the exquisite track Front Porch Rain, where the tempo slows back down to a contemplative 82 BPM. The psychoacoustics here are entirely focused on healing and decompression. The instrumentation is sparse, mimicking the gentle, repetitive sound of rainfall.
The imagery is a stark contrast to the claustrophobia of the one-window apartment. They are sitting outside, side by side in rocking chairs. They have coffee cooling in their hands. They're listening to the rain hit a tin roof, and they are watching a thunderstorm roll across the horizon miles away. The storm is visible, but it can no longer touch them.
The rain serves as a powerful metaphor for emotional release. It is washing away the accumulated dust of their hypervigilance. They sit there reflecting on the decades that have passed, viewing their memories like passing trains full of losses, full of gains. It is the profound, quiet realization that they have outlasted their enemies.
This realization is solidified in the track Still Here, which nudges the tempo slightly to 90 BPM to signify a steady, waking heartbeat. The song is a declaration of endurance. Morning light across the floor, same old house, open door, quiet proof in every breath. We outlived the threats.
We outlived the threats. That line is the thesis of the entire maturity phase. They've reached an age where the mere fact of their continued existence is the ultimate victory. The story ends not with triumph in a dramatic sense. There's no applause, no medals hung upon the wall.
Just the practical piece of continuity.
Exactly. The lyrics strip away any lingering desire for external validation. Every wrinkle tells the truth. We survived our youth.
They are completely self-aware about the nature of their success. They acknowledge no medals hung upon the wall, no headlines after all, just two hearts that chose to stay come what may. If we connect this back to how we started this deep dive, it's the ultimate rejection of the Hollywood ending. There is no parade. There is no public ceremony. There is just the practical, ironclad piece of continuity. Survival itself has become the victory.
Which brings us to the emotional climax of the narrative. The final vocal track, Love Lives Here, set at a deeply comforting 88 BPM. The album closes with the porch light glowing and the door left unlocked. To fully grasp the weight of this finale, the source material reconnects us with the prose story of Nadira and Kiara, fast-forwarding years into the future.
Right, bringing it all back together.
Yeah.
The terrifying Tuesday of the final notice is decades behind them at this point. The narrative tells us that stability has finally settled over their lives, wrapping around them like a heavy, well-worn blanket. The frantic math is gone. The bills are automatically paid. The refrigerator hums, consistently full. The physical space they occupy is no longer fragile. It is permanent.
But the psychological memory of that fragility remains, transformed from a source of terror into a source of deep gratitude. They never forgot the evening that economic ruin stood at their door and the sheer force of will it took to lock it out. This collective memory gives birth to a completely mundane, deeply profound anniversary ritual.
This detail from the source material is what stuck with me the most. Every single year, on the exact anniversary of the day they scraped together the money to pay that final notice, Nadira observes a silent ritual. At exactly 6:12 p.m., the precise minute they had been sitting at that second-hand table staring at the red stample. Nadira walks into their kitchen.
She stands in the darkening room, reaches out, and flips the light switch.
And the overhead light engages instantly. There is no flickering. There is no hesitation. It is bright, warm, and absolutely reliable. She stands there for a moment, simply watching the room fill with illumination. Then she calls out across the hallway of their home. Lights are on.
And Kiara, wherever she happens to be in the house, calls back with the exact same response she gives every single year. I know.
Wow.
Her voice isn't dramatic or tearful. It is incredibly calm. It is anchored in the unshakable certainty that comes from having built a fortress with your own two hands.
I want you to really think about the magnitude of that interaction. What does true, unassailable stability actually feel like? We spend so much of our lives chasing abstract concepts of success, We chase wealth, we chase status, we chase visibility. But this narrative strips all of that away to reveal the core of human longing. True stability isn't luxury. It is the absolute quiet confidence that the lights will turn on when you flip the switch.
It's powerful.
It is knowing that when you speak into the empty hallway of your life, the person who helped you survive the darkness is going to answer you. It is not rich, it is not famous, not perfect, just steady.
That steadiness is the monument the album set out to build. They carved a sanctuary out of an environment that was actively hostile to their existence. They kept their heads down, they calculated the math of their survival, they held hands in the shadows, and they slowly, methodically outlasted the storm. They won.
They absolutely won. We followed a quiet, terrified child sitting in the back row of a church, desperately trying to fold herself into nothingness to protect a dangerous internal truth. And we watched that truth evolve, survive the suffocating silence of a family dinner, weather the economic terror of a one-window apartment, and eventually build an unbreakable architecture of love and dignity. It is a stunning testament to the endurance of the human spirit.
It perfectly articulates why the quietest lives often contain the most epic battles, and why ordinary survival is worthy of deep artistic reverence.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a slightly different angle to consider, something that builds on the mechanics of secrecy we've discussed today. The protagonist, along with Nadira and Kiara, survived by mastering the discipline of concealment in an analog world. They could hide their truth by simply remaining quiet, by moving to a new neighborhood, by existing in the physical shadows of a bus stop or a one-window apartment. Their sanctuary was built on their ability to control who saw them and when. But what happens to that survival mechanism today? If Nadira and Kiara were forced to navigate that exact same journey in our current era, an era defined by digital footprints, location tracking, algorithmic surveillance, and smart homes that record our every preference, how would that fundamentally change the nature of their sanctuary? In a world where absolute physical secrecy is almost technologically impossible, how do marginalized people construct a safe harbor? What is your 6:12 p.m. kitchen light switch in a world that never unplugs?
That is an incredibly complex and vital question for the modern era.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the profound mechanics of She Loved Her. Keep looking for the quiet victories in your own life, and we will catch you next time.